Good morning. Welcome to Journal for this Wednesday, May 14th. I'm Meg LaVigne. According to psychologist Shad Helmstetter, 77% of what we say to ourselves is negative programming. And whether or not we succeed or fail in life has mostly to do with what he calls self-talk. Well, he'll be here in the second half of our program this morning, and we'll be talking about his new book, which is called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. But first, network television celebrates its 40th anniversary this year, and according to a new book published by my first guest this morning, television has dramatically changed the way we all live. My guest his name is Joshua Meyrowitz, and he's an associate professor of communication at the University of New Hampshire, and he joins me this morning to discuss his new book, which is called No Sense of Place. And I'm wondering, Professor, first, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm wondering, what does No Sense of Place stand for? What does that mean in terms of TV?
Well, it means that television has broken that age-old connection between where we are, the places we're in, and what we can see and experience. And that's changed the way that we all behave. For example, our children may still be sheltered at home in an isolated and safe physical place, and yet television now takes them across the globe and into the adult world before we as parents even give them permission to cross the street.
So you're saying that's negative?
Well, I'm saying it's very different. I think that we used to think that childhood was a time of innocence and isolation, and there were many secrets that we kept from children, things such as birth, death, sex, drugs, abortion, suicide, even the fact that adults do not always know what to do with children. Those were all secrets we kept from them, and now children are exposed to those secrets every day.
So what effect has that had in your mind on the way people live, or the way our children are brought up to, to live?
Well, we find that our children are acting in more adult-like ways. We see more adult-like children. They speak about nuclear war, they know about drugs, they know about sex, and they also know a lot about adults. They know that adults don't always know best, that adults kill each other, that adults cry. And that means that for adults and as parents, we're much more exposed than we used to be. We can't play the old roles with our children anymore. They don't buy it. They don't accept it, that we know everything. And so we see more adult-like children, and we see adults being more childlike. They give up trying to pretend to be always all-knowing.
But how about the difference between what's real on TV and what isn't, in terms of a television talk show that's fantasy, not a talk show? Sorry. Talk show.
Great admission.
A series, dramatic series, or a cop show that's not real. And then a news event that is real.
Well, I think that we see on television many things that are unreal, and yet when I was a kid and watching television, as silly and as unreal as much television content was, I learned many truths about social behavior. And this came even from silly programs and very innocent-seeming programs like Father Knows Best, where here you have a show with very innocent children, and people still think that show would lead to innocent kids who were watching it. And yet when I watched that show as a kid, I didn't learn to imitate the innocent children. I learned some real truths about social behavior, that adults behave one way when they're in front of their kids and another way when they're alone. That when they're in front of their children, they pretend to know best, but when they're by themselves, they express their doubts and their fears and their anxieties. And so that show led me, and I think my whole generation, to wonder about the credibility gap, the difference between what people do publicly and what they really think and say privately. So I think even in the unreal shows, those shows expose children to things that are actually true about social behavior, that people play roles for each other, that they try to structure and control information, and that leads to a new perception of adulthood and of adult authority in kids.
We spend a lot of time, though, analyzing television shows and saying that's good for you, that's bad for you. And of course, a lot of it has to do with personal taste. I've gotten in conversations over the years where I've said, I just don't think that show should be on TV. I don't think there's any value in that. And someone will say, well, your sense of value may not be my sense of value, but, where do you draw what's the common denominator when you're evaluating those kinds of shows?
I think the common denominator is that television is a common denominator, that it's something that we all share. Now, there are many shows that I find very offensive on television, and women, of course, find many shows very offensive because the roles of women are so sexist. Yet I think if you look at what television did for women, it wasn't in their imitating the sexist roles on TV, it was in exposing women, even homebound women. When television first spread through our culture, many women were full-time housewives. They were isolated in the home, and they were cut off from that male world. And all these topics they weren't supposed to know about or think about, politics and war and sports and bravery and competition and business. And television exposed women to all those parts of the culture that they were told they shouldn't know anything about, they shouldn't want to participate in, they shouldn't think about. And so I think television opened up the world to women. It brought the world home to women. And it's broken down the difference between the male and the female spheres of our culture.
It's interesting. When you were saying that, I was thinking about a commercial. I think it's, I'm not sure what the commercial was for, but with a woman, you know, I can bring home the bacon and I can do everything else. And now you see women, I think it's an American Express ad, a very subliminal kind of, she
takes the man out.
Yeah, it's almost like creating the image as opposed to reflecting what's out there.
Yeah. Well, I think that television both creates and reflects. What television often does is it overstates. It overstated the innocent world of the 50s, and now as television itself has brought about many of these changes, more knowledgeable children, more involved women, now it overstates these changes. And you see the kids on television shows being smarter than the parents, and the women being stronger than and more capable than anyone could be in real life. So you see this kind of overstating. But I think the real impact of television is in rearranging who knows what about whom. Television exposes people to the same information regardless of how old they are, what sex they are, what level of status or authority they have in society. And since information is power, television has empowered many of the parts of the population, young children and women and minorities, who used to be completely cut off from the larger world.
When you say empowered, what then do they do with that? What makes them more powerful?
Well, you find that when people know about things, for example, when children know that adults have a childlike side, when adults pretend to know best when they don't always know best, or when women know that men, although they appear fearless and emotionless in public, actually put on that role for women, and women start talking about that in front of men, then the roles become very difficult to play out anymore. It becomes much more difficult to, it's like the Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy pulls back the curtain and there's the wizard with this little man in front of a microphone and he's shouting. He's still trying to project this big image of power, but the information, the access to information that Dorothy has now makes it impossible for him to keep speaking.
Well, he's a phony.
Yeah.
It's not real, right?
Well, he's
manipulating.
He's manipulating his image, and this is something that what television does is changed our abilities in life in general to manipulate our image in particular ways. For example, you could argue that the parents on Father Knows Best were in a way phonies when Jim, as the father, pretends to always know what's best, and then in private says, "Gee, I wonder how good a father I am. Am I really doing the right thing?" We all play kinds of roles where we, in front of our audiences, we pretend to be all-knowing and knowledgeable. And behind the scenes, we say, "Gee, do I really know what I'm talking about?" And what happens at different times and in different cultures, we have different possibilities for how much we can hide. When people can hide a lot, when they can keep a lot of secrets from each other, then they can present very, very formal on-stage roles, even though they're very fearful and doubtful backstage. But
in recent years, a lot of shows, like a Hill Street Blues, for instance, has presented characters who are very vulnerable, who make mistakes and aren't perfect. You know, not the Father Knows Best image of someone who always does the right thing and knows what to say at the right time. So it seems like television has gotten away from that.
Oh, certainly. It's gotten very much away from it, because within a few years of all those shows showing how adults try to present themselves, how men and women try to play roles for each other, and how politicians and other authorities try to project authority, once all that information is exposed, you can't carry off the old roles anymore. And so you find in real life and on television that people are exposing to their audiences, they're letting information on stage that used to be kept hidden backstage. And so you find men and women talking about the old strategies of how they were raised and what they were supposed to do, and how men were not supposed to feel anything, and how women weren't supposed to think about anything. And once people talk about those things publicly, you can't carry off the old roles as easily, and you find television reflecting that in the new shows. Well, first, things like One Day at a Time, where the parents, the mother, expressed her doubts and her fears in front of her children. Didn't hide them.
It wasn't hidden.
And then in Maude, where the female character was stronger than the man. And now we see a shift, slight moderation of that, to the Bill Cosby Show, where the kids are still sharper than the kids in the old shows, and the parents don't try to hide as much as the parents did in the old shows, but where there's a little bit of the reinstating of adult authority and adult control. And we see the same thing in Kate and Allie and other programs. We see somewhat of an adjustment to that.
I wanted to ask you before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you what concerns me a lot, and I think a lot of us are talking about in lieu of something like a shuttle tragedy or an assassination attempt on a president, are things that are so unique that we've never seen before. And when you're watching something that's real and you can watch it over and over again and see it repeated, what are your opinions on the effects of those kinds of events?
I think they have very dramatic power because television is unlike any other medium in that millions of people can watch the same person or event at the same moment. And yet in spite of that massive and impersonal size of that arena, we have this sense that we have this intimate relationship with the people there. With Krista McCullough, for example, we felt we knew her, that she was our neighbor, our teacher, our friend. And when she was killed, it was just an overpowering sense of grief. And television, which had created that relationship, it gave birth to that relationship. We didn't really know her. Also felt the responsibility, I think, to play a major role in the mourning and to make us, since there was no place to go, no funeral, there was no, you know, we had no, what do you do, write a letter, call the bereaved? I mean, it's not like real people that we know. Even though they are real people, millions of us don't have that intimate relationship with the family. And so we wanted to see that over and over again on television, to the event itself, to come to terms with it.
Isn't it then that television is making reality, or is creating reality?
Yes, this was not simply an event that was reported on television. This was an event that was designed in advance to exist on television. I think NASA even wanted to get us involved in this shuttle takeoff by involving us in a single person, someone like you or me. And I think they even chose Krista the way game show producers choose contestants. Is she bubbly? Will she make good television? And of course she did.
I'm sorry we have to leave off on that kind of a note, because I'd like to talk more about that and some other issues, but it's a fascinating book. No Sense of Place is the name of it, and I enjoyed it, and I hope people, if they're interested in television or interested in the future, which is certainly going to be comprised largely of this medium, they should pick it up. Thanks, Professor. Nice to have had you here.
It's nice to have been here.
Enjoyed it. And I hope you stay tuned, because coming up next, we're going to meet psychologist Shad Helmstetter, and he's going to have some advice on how self-talk can make you more successful. So stay tuned. Journal returns right after this.